I didn't understand the first bill because it wasn't mine. The envelope said my name, the address was correct, and inside there was a glossy statement for a brand new smartphone plan with 4 extra lines and a streaming bundle I had never heard of. I thought it was a mistake from the postman, folded it back with the care of a woman who has spent her life keeping drawers tidy, and set it under the sugar jar. 2 days later the calls began. A cheerful woman from an appliance store congratulating me on my kitchen upgrade and asking when I wanted the delivery of the stainless steel refrigerator I supposedly financed for 24 months. My hand shook so much I spilled tea on my blouse. I am not a nervous person. I am 69, a retired school secretary, and I keep track of every screw in my apartment toolbox by size and length. But that call made my skin cold. You know how it is at our age, people assume we're confused. I could hear it in the store clerk's voice when I said there had been a mistake. She slowed down each word, as if I were a child. I apologized more than I should, wrote down her name anyway, and hung up. Then I called my daughter. Marta was busy, but when she arrived that night with her husband, Pablo, I had the bills laid out on the kitchen table alongside my ledger, my old blue pen, and my glasses, which I only take off to sleep. There were already 3 statements: telecom, appliance store, and a small electronics shop. I didn't recognize any of the items, just the last 4 digits of my identification showing in the letters, which made my stomach twist. It's some database error, Mama, Pablo said, sweeping the papers together with a quick hand, like a croupier collecting cards. The telecoms mess up all the time. Let me call them in the morning. We'll sort it. Marta kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. She looked relieved that Pablo had taken it on, as if my panic were a heavy bag and he a strong porter. He likes being the man who knows things: routers, tariffs, easy financing. While they were leaving, he took the bills, and I was so grateful I didn't notice how fast he slipped them into his backpack. The next day, a notification arrived to my phone, my ancient phone that sticks on the letter R, saying my credit limit had been adjusted due to recent activity. I hadn't asked for any credit. I held the phone until my palm hurt. In the afternoon, I went down to the concierge's desk to ask if he had seen a delivery truck by mistake. Don Luis, a quiet man with a sad mustache and a chessboard tucked under his stool, checked the log and said no deliveries had come for me. He lifted his eyes and, after a pause, added that he had seen Pablo at my mailbox 2 nights ago, late, when he returned from locking the community room. He told me you'd asked him to collect your letters, Señora Inés. I believed him. Should I not have? I opened my mouth, but the words took a slow route. My mouth closed again. Do you still have the camera by the elevator, Luis? I asked finally. He nodded, cautious now, like a man stepping onto a frozen pond. The recordings are overwritten after a week. Do you want me to check before they disappear? That was when my hands stopped shaking. Yes, please, I said. And, Luis, don't mention this to anyone yet. That night, as the kettle rattled softly on the stove, another letter slid under my door. Notice of past due. Immediate attention required. Someone had signed my name so many times that my own signature suddenly looked like a stranger's. And then, like he was making a show of kindness, Pablo texted me, all handled. Don't stress. I stared at those words and felt something small and hard click into place inside me, like the latch of a safe. The next morning, Luis knocked on my door with a USB drive he shouldn't have given me and a look that said he already regretted it. Inside were 2 short clips and a still photo. In all 3, by the light of the lobby, my son-in-law was quietly lifting my letters out of the box. I took a breath, and for the first time since the first envelope, I let myself be angry. Because now I wasn't guessing. I had a witness and a date stamp, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. But I also knew I had to pretend I was. I sent Pablo a voice note thanking him for helping and telling him I'd bring over a casserole on Sunday. Then I printed 3 copies of the still photo and put them under the sugar jar where the first bill had slept. I was done being tidy in the way that keeps everyone else comfortable. I was going to be meticulous in a new way. Because the next thing that arrived wasn't a bill. It was a thick envelope with my name and a red stamp from the credit bureau. Inside was a report that didn't belong to me, a list of debts, lines, inquiries. A map of someone else's shopping spree drawn with my numbers. And a final page with a polite sentence that made my knees weaken. If you believe any of the above information is inaccurate, you may dispute it. That sentence was a rope thrown to a drowning woman. I grabbed it. The humiliation that followed didn't come from strangers. It came in small, familiar doses from people who loved the idea of me more than the person in front of them. On the family WhatsApp, my sister sent a chain message about older people and online scams, the kind that ends with a sunflower and a prayer. Marta replied with a heart and wrote, "Don't worry, Papa would have handled it. P says it's just an administrative glitch." I typed and erased 3 different sentences before I sent a thumbs up. When you are 69 and widowed, you learn that dignity sometimes means saying nothing until you have the right sentence. Debt collectors began calling my landline during the breakfast news. I would answer, hand shaking, and a voice would ask for Mrs. Romero to verify her date of birth. I refused, hung up, and recorded every call in my Blue Ledger with time, name, and reference number. At the pharmacy, I caught 2 neighbors lowering their voices as I entered. "Poor Inés," one of them murmured. "At our age, numbers get confusing." The other one touched my sleeve at the counter and offered her son's help with the internet. My face burned as if I'd been windswept. I paid for my arthritis cream and walked out holding my bag too tight, back straight, making sure they saw me steady. I knew the rule in our city. To change a credit file, you had to show the paper. Hearsay is nothing. A stamped document is oxygen. So I made a plan that looked like surrender but wasn't. On Sunday at Marta's, while the casserole heated and the grandchildren argued about a plastic dinosaur, I said the one sentence I knew would relax everyone who wanted me easy to manage. "Marta, Carino, maybe it's time I let you and Pablo help me with my things. I tire quickly. Maybe a power of attorney for little things, bills, contract calls. I trust you both." Pablo's eyes lit for a second, the quick flash of a gambler spotting a weak table. He put his beer down too fast. "If it makes you feel safer," he said, voice silk, "we can arrange something limited, of course." "Limited," I repeated. "Only bills. Not the flat, not my pension." Marta looked at me with gratitude, mistaking my offer for dependence. The next morning, I booked an appointment at the notary 2 weeks out. I needed that time. Because the rule of the world I had learned as a school secretary still held. If you want a field trip approved, you don't ask for a signature. You arrive with the bus paid, the lunch counted, the permission slips in order. I started with the credit bureau. I filed a fraud alert and a dispute for each item I didn't recognize. I uploaded copies of my identification, a sworn statement I typed myself and had stamped at the notary's mailbox service, the photo of Pablo at my mailbox, and a letter from the telecom company confirming installation at an address that wasn't mine. 4 days later, an investigator named Anna called me with a voice that carried equal parts protocol and human curiosity. "Mrs. Romero, I'm reviewing your file. Some of these accounts were opened with e-signatures and one with a recorded call. Would you be willing to listen to a sample?" We put the call on speaker. The recording was a man pretending not to be in a hurry. He stumbled over my second surname and tried to imitate a tone of politeness he must think older women have. He got my birth year wrong. The agent on the line gently corrected him, and he laughed, a laugh that pricked me like a memory of too many Sunday football broadcasts. "We'll email the contract to the address on file," the agent said. He read out an email I had never owned. It included the year Pablo and Marta married. My spine went cold. After the clip ended, Anna spoke quietly. "We will flag these for deletion if we confirm identity theft. But we also see a rebate from an appliance purchase paid to a third-party account. We will need a bank audit or a receipt tying that account to the person who authorized the purchase." I turned my ledger so I could see the notes. "I can get it," I said. "Give me 72 hours. That afternoon, I walked to the electronics shop that had congratulated me for the refrigerator. The manager, a young man with careful hair and the expression of a person paid to say no, told me they could not release purchase documents to anyone but the buyer. "But I am the buyer on paper," I said. He gave me the smile they give you when they think you won't make trouble and repeated store policy. I stood there, quiet, and then leaned closer. Then call the number on your invoice and ask me to confirm the delivery address, I said. I'll wait. He looked at me like I'd placed a trap he didn't want to step into. He dialed anyway. The voice that answered was familiar in all the ways I didn't want it to be. After he hung up, the manager's eyes had softened. He printed the invoice and slid it to me with 2 fingers. I shouldn't, he said. But the delivery address is not yours, Senora. I copied the account number where the rebate had gone and thanked him by his name, which startled him more than my request had. By then, small blows kept coming. A cousin wrote in the family group that someone should take away Inés's cards before she gets into real trouble. Marta called and asked if I had been online shopping at night. You've been awake later than usual, Mama. The kids say you message with odd punctuation. I stared at the window until I could keep my voice even. I'm all right, Marta. I'm sending you a note for the notary. We'll do this properly. That night, Luis came upstairs with a manila folder under his jacket. He looked guilty and resolute at the same time. A technician from the telecom came the day they installed the fiber at your son-in-law's sister's flat, he said. He asked me to sign a neighbor confirmation. I refused because it wasn't in our building. But he left his contact on a card. I thought you might want it. Inside the folder was a photocopy of a service order with 3 names I recognized and 1 I didn't. You could get into trouble for this, I told him. So could I for watching a neighbor cry in the elevator and doing nothing, he answered, eyes on the floor. My wife says I have to stop minding my own business. I put my hand on his sleeve, surprised by how steady it was. Thank you, Luis. You didn't have to mind mine. But you did. I didn't sleep that night. I made soup I didn't eat and folded towels that were already neat. At 2 a.m., I opened my ledger and wrote, in small letters, a sentence I needed to see in ink, no more being easy to manage. Then I made decisions that I knew would look like I was surrendering. I sent Marta a scan of a limited power of attorney I had drafted with the notary's template, utilities, and contract inquiries only, and told her we could sign it early. What I didn't mention was that I also scheduled a separate appointment at the bank for a routine review of my customer profile with the compliance officer. A power of attorney triggers something like a soft earthquake in the financial system. It shakes loose records. At the notary, Pablo arrived with the quick air of a man who wants to be done before lunch. He smelled faintly of tobacco and the gel he uses to fix his hair on Sundays. We'll take care of everything, Inés, he said, performing concern. You shouldn't be dealing with this. It's exhausting at your age. He glanced toward the notary clerk, making sure his benevolence had an audience. I smiled as if he had handed me a blanket. You're very kind, I said. I know you know these things. We signed, the notary stamped, and Pablo walked out with a spring in his step. He had the comfort of someone who believes the lock has clicked shut in his favor. Marta squeezed my hand and whispered that everything would be calmer now. I nodded and told her I needed 5 minutes to ask the notary about my will. She kissed my cheek and followed Pablo out. The notary ushered me into a smaller room where a woman in a navy dress waited. She introduced herself as a staff lawyer and asked me, softly, whether I was safe. I blinked too fast. I need a certified statement of identity theft for the credit bureau, I said. And I need it today if possible. She asked a few questions, looked at the copies of the invoices and the camera still, and wrote a short affidavit that she stamped with a rectangular seal that felt heavier than it looked. I paid in cash from an envelope I keep for what my late husband used to call unpleasant errands. From there, I walked straight to the bank. The compliance officer, a woman my daughter's age with kind eyebrows and a reputation for being precise, took me into a side office and explained the review procedure. We verify changes in representation and compare with recent account activity. Mostly routine, she said, clicking through screens. Her face changed after the 3rd click. Mrs. Romero, did you authorize a debit for a device protection plan from an electronics store last month? I don't even know what that is, I answered. It's bundled with a financing contract, not in your usual pattern. She turned the screen slightly so I could see the title, Consumer Credit, Appliance Bundle Romero, Inés. My heart went thump so loud I saw her notice. I gave her the affidavit, the invoice copy, and the rebate transfer number. She took a careful breath and made 3 phone calls using language I taught myself to recognize: suspicious pattern, KYC refresh, third-party benefit. By the time I left, the bank had placed a temporary freeze on any new credit lines attached to my identification. At home, Anna from the credit bureau called again. We received the affidavit and the bank notice. We've already removed 2 telecom lines and the electronics contract from your file pending final verification. I will issue a protective record to prevent new loans for 90 days unless you appear in person with identification. I thanked her in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else. Small victories make you giddy, which is when the world likes to slap you. That evening, I opened my filing cabinet to take out the photocopy of my birth certificate I use for these documents and found the folder missing. I keep duplicates of everything in triplicate, the leftover habit of a school secretary who filed permission slips for 25 years, but that particular copy was gone. The drawer smelled faintly of cologne that was not mine. I sat on the floor and leaned my head against the cabinet so the cold metal would keep me steady. I called Marta. "Carino, did you or Pablo take a folder from my filing cabinet?" I tried to make my voice sound harmless. Silence on the line. The kind of silence you can hear someone arrange. "P only grabbed the utility bills to help Mama," she said. "He said the rest was messy." "Nothing in that drawer is messy," I answered, fingers on the cool metal. "Tell him to bring back what isn't his." We hung up and seconds later a message arrived from Pablo. "Relax. We're handling it." Then another. "Don't do anything else without checking with me, or you'll make it worse." I put the phone face down on the floor and breathed with my hand on the cabinet, like a swimmer learning a new stroke. That night, someone slipped another letter under my door. It wasn't a bill. It was a bureau fax, a formal notice from a retailer threatening legal action for non-payment on a luxury washer-dryer. The purchase date matched the day Pablo had been at my mailbox on the camera. I laughed once, one short, mean syllable, because it felt like the universe had decided to send me my own evidence by certified post. I chose the place for the exposure as carefully as one chooses a church for a wedding. Not a courtroom, not the police station. I had already filed a report there with a patient officer who had a mother my age and eyes that showed pity without disrespect. I chose Marta's birthday lunch at the neighborhood restaurant where she had celebrated every year since childhood, the one with paper tablecloths that children color and photographs of local football teams on the walls. Family, neighbors, 3 of Pablo's uncles who always speak too loudly, the gossiping neighbor from the pharmacy, enough witnesses to make silence difficult. Before the meal, I slipped the waiter a folded note. "At 2 o'clock, please bring the special deliveries." He nodded with the discretion of a man who has seen many family dramas play out over paella. We made it to the main course before Pablo, performing benevolence again, announced that he would gladly handle any complicated paperwork for Mama from now on. A few people clapped, mistaking control for kindness. I stood, hands calm on the chair back. "Since you're offering, Pablo," I said, "perhaps you can explain why the telecom refunded a router installation to your sister's account. And why you were at my mailbox at midnight on the day a washer-dryer was purchased in my name." The table turned its head as one. Pablo laughed his easy laugh. "Inés, honestly, this is not the time. You're confused. We'll talk later." "We will," I said. "But now is good." I nodded to the waiter. He placed a stack of envelopes in front of me, 3 certified letters from the credit bureau and 1 from the bank. My hands didn't tremble when I opened them. I read only the parts that mattered, in the voice I used to take attendance so no one could pretend they didn't hear. Pursuant to investigation, lines opened on date, at address, removed as fraudulent. Consumer installments for refrigerator canceled, rebate paid to account ending 1824 to be recovered. Protective record placed on identification. Any attempt to open credit will be blocked and logged for law enforcement. I passed the letters to Marta. She had gone pale. Pablo reached for the stack, and I held it a second too long, so he had to tug. It made a sound like fabric tearing. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Anyone could have put my sister's account on a form by mistake." "Then perhaps explain this," said a new voice behind me. Anna, the credit bureau investigator, had asked whether she could stop by to have me sign the final removal in person because of the protective record I'd requested. I had told her where we'd be, half expecting she wouldn't come. She stood there now in a simple suit, an official badge clipped to her pocket. She placed a printed audit on the table. We traced the IP address used to submit the e-signatures for 2 of the contracts and the recorded call you heard, Mrs. Romero. The IP belongs to an account installed at your sister's apartment, sir. And the call was made from a number registered to your name the month before the purchase. There was a silence that changed the air pressure. Pablo said nothing for the first time since I met him. His jaw moved like he was chewing a lie too hard to swallow. Also, Anna continued, standard procedure is to notify the account holder of approvals. Our logs show those emails were redirected with a rule set up the day your mother-in-law gave you access to her Wi-Fi to fix her printer. I imagine you remember. The fake benefactor had been closer than I thought. The first line in my name had been opened months earlier by someone helping me switch internet providers, Pablo's sister, who had earned her rebate, and then Pablo, who had turned a trickle into a river once he saw how easy my signature came off the screen. I didn't have to say any of that. It sat there in the audit like a wet footprint. This is a family misunderstanding, Pablo said finally. We'll resolve it privately. No, I said, as gently as if I were correcting a child in my office. We'll resolve what is mine. The rest will resolve itself. I looked at Marta. Her eyes were on Anna's papers, then on the still photo Luis had printed, which I placed on top. You stole her letters, Luis's voice came, soft and ashamed, from the doorway. He was holding his cap in both hands like a man at a funeral. And I let you convince me it was a favor. He laid a USB drive by the plate with Marta's name card. Here is the footage. I should have brought it sooner. Marta inhaled sharply, a sound I had only heard when she gave birth. She turned to Pablo with a face I hadn't seen on my daughter since she was 16 and discovered a classmate had copied her essay. Did you use my mother's ID? She asked, voice steady enough to slice. Pablo tried to stand. 2 of his uncles put their hands on his shoulders without looking at him, as if they had been waiting years to do it. The waiter appeared, nervous, with the dessert that suddenly no one wanted. In the quiet, my phone buzzed with a new email from the bank compliance officer. I opened it and read, Loan Committee flags applied. Subject restricted from new credit pending investigation. I didn't need to say it aloud. Pablo looked at my face and knew. The days that followed had the odd, clean rhythm of a house after a storm, when you've thrown away the spoiled food and opened the windows, and there is air where there used to be damp. The credit bureau removed the fraudulent lines and sent me a packet of printed confirmations with embossed stamps I traced with my thumb before filing them in a fresh folder. The police concluded their report and told me that charges would proceed for identity theft, a process that would take months and require patience I discovered I could afford. My bank restored my credit profile and the protective record stayed in place by my choice. It meant slight inconveniences at times, showing my identification in person to raise a limit, signing in blue instead of black, but it also meant my name had a guard at the gate. I liked that. As for Pablo, the finance company placed him on their internal blacklist for abusive practices. The bank's committee barred him from taking out loans, and the electronics store demanded the return of the refrigerator he had bought to impress a neighbor. That part would have been funny if it weren't so sad. 2 men came and wheeled it out past the concierge desk while Luis pretended to be absorbed in his chessboard. People noticed. Our building talks, and this time it spoke on my side. The neighbor from the pharmacy squeezed my hand one morning and said, I misjudged you, Inés. I'm sorry. I told her there was nothing to forgive and mend it, though I appreciated her heat rising to her cheeks. Marta moved through grief the way practical people do, by doing. She drove to the notary and revoked the power of attorney we had signed. Even though it had been limited, she called the school to make sure the children's records listed me as an emergency contact. She sat on my sofa until midnight 2 nights in a row apologizing for every time she had chosen convenience over truth. I didn't make a speech. I brought her water, and when she had run out of apologies, I put my hand over hers. We keep going from here, I said. With clear drawers. She laughed at that through tears. The only person I forbade from coming to my door was Pablo. His calls went unanswered, his messages unread, his soft voice asking for a second chance, routed to a folder I never opened. My boundary was not loud. It was firm as a locked drawer with the key in my pocket. I took the energy I had used for fear and moved it into something that made sense for my hands. The community center down the street needed volunteers to help older residents read their bank statements and understand their phone contracts. It turns out a woman who can balance a school's petty cash down to the coin is very popular on Wednesdays. Anna, the bureau investigator, called once more, unofficially, to say that my file had become a training example. "We will anonymize it, of course," she said. "But the way you documented everything, the ledger, the timestamps, that will help others." I thanked her, and after we hung up, I sat a while looking at my blue pen as if I'd never seen it properly before. We are told our neatness is small. It is not. It is armor. On the first Sunday after everything, I invited Luis and his wife for coffee, and I returned the USB drive wrapped in brown paper. We sat by my balcony with a plate of store-bought pastries, and he looked lighter, like a man whose back crackles into alignment. "I'm glad it's done," he said. My father always said a man's job is to open the door for the right person and keep it closed for the wrong one. I didn't do either for a while. I told him he had done both in the end. Then I did a small, happy thing that had nothing to do with paperwork. I bought myself a modest new phone with letters that didn't stick and a camera good enough to capture the way the afternoon light hits the plant on my kitchen sill. At the shop, the young clerk asked if I wanted to bundle it with a streaming service. I laughed and told him no. "I am very careful with bundles," I said. He didn't understand the joke, but I did. I walked home with the box in my bag, feeling the particular pleasure of something chosen, not imposed. If there is a lesson in all this, and I prefer actions to lessons, it is that being underestimated is a key kept in your pocket. If you know you have it, you can wait for the right lock. I agreed to be a burden on paper for a week so that the system would look at what it had ignored, and when it looked, it saw. I let the man who wanted to manage me collect my letters until there were enough letters to line a path straight to his door. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my file. And sometimes that's the sweetest taste of revenge. Not shouting, not slamming a door, but watching the door close quietly on the person who cannot enter anymore because you have finally learned the simplest trick. You keep the key. You decide who is family and who is a man with someone else's pen. Now, when I pass the concierge desk, Luis lifts his king in salute. On Wednesdays, people bring their ledgers to me like offerings, and I show them where to put the stamp. On my kitchen shelf, under the sugar jar, there is nothing now but sugar and a folded photograph of my grandchildren taken last weekend at the park. The rest sits in a clean folder labeled with my name. It is mine again. And perhaps that is what I want you to imagine when you finish listening. Your name, written clearly in your own hand, on a drawer that opens and closes only for you.